Hey gang, it's Squill, and unlike Cake the Cat, Prismo the Wishmaster gives us a lot to talk about. This episode is loaded, so let's just get into the review. Prismo the Wishmaster is sort of the transitional episode of the season, where we finish up the introductory stuff and finally begin multiverse jumping. Prismo the Wishmaster opens up in the Drift of all places, which I was not expecting to see again. It's a really cool location, and I'm happy we got to see it again, even if it was only brief. And it is the first of many cameos in this episode. It's in this scene that we're introduced to the main antagonist of the miniseries, that being Scarab. I have pretty mixed thoughts on Scarab as a villain. I love his design and voice, and I think for his first two episodes, he makes for a fairly intimidating threat. I think my main problem with Scarab is that episodes 6 through 8 sideline him so much, to the point where it's kinda hard to take him seriously as the main antagonist of the show. It's like, really? This is the guy we're dealing with? Okay. Then again, Adventure Time's villain roster has always been pretty weak, at least for the most part, so I guess I shouldn't be too disappointed. Also, shoutouts to Martin flipping us off, hilarious cameo. I wonder if desertion refers to him escaping the Citadel, or whatever his new mode of existence is. Or some third thing we don't even know about. After the cold open, we cut to the time room, in which we see Prismo and the objectively worst person in the show. As I mentioned last episode, Jake's death clearly left Prismo in a depressive slump. Heck, he's even lounging around in the same pool that he and Jake hung out in. In fact, Prismo is so depressed that Kumail Nanjiani couldn't even come back to play him, so Sean Rohani had to fill in his shoes. But for real, it's such a bummer that Kumail's agent screwed him out of the role. Someone definitely deserves to get fired for that. Despite that, Sean gives an excellent performance as Prismo here, to the point where I sometimes forget that he has a new voice actor. Prismo being depressed here definitely helps his voice sound more natural, since it makes sense that he wouldn't sound the exact same as the upbeat, chipper Prismo we got in the original show. But going back to Wyatt, I find it really funny how they took the time to explain how he ended up in the first Dead World and together again. I mean, I would have just believed that he ended up there either way, because he's Wyatt, but it's so much funnier imagining him committing some unspeakably horrible acts just to get to the time room. And all to accidentally wish for it being quiet enough for him to think. Which is weirdly similar to a gag in an early episode of Wander Over Yonder. I really love the visuals here on the black and white silent universe that Wyatt gets sent to. It was a great opportunity to bring Tree Trunks back without having her be voiced by the late Polly Lou Livingston. I really like the sequence, but I've always found it to be kinda eerie, and I'm not really sure if anyone else feels that way. I don't know, it's probably just the music, but I've always found myself weirdly unsettled by this scene. Oh, and this freaky shot of the Lich probably isn't helping much. After permanently tormenting Wyatt, Prismo checks his remote to notice that there is a crossover happening. I really enjoyed the way this episode contextualizes the title to the Season 7 episode crossover, to refer to people from one universe crossing over to that of another. The sequence of Prismo flipping through a bunch of characters gives us some really fun cameos. My favorite of which being Susan and Frida. It was great seeing them again. Crazy part is, this isn't even the last sequence like this we get in the episode. This episode is one big cameo fest, and I mean that in the best way possible. Prismo eventually finds Fiona and Cake and beams them into the time room. This is when we finally see Fiona and Cake in their original forms. One of my favorite details in this episode, and most of the rest of the miniseries, is just how awkward Cake's shapeshifting here is. It's fun seeing Cake try to get used to her new abilities. It makes me wonder if Jake similarly had an awkward phase where he had to get used to his powers, sorta like a baby first learning how to walk. Soon after, Prismo sends in Simon, and he's booty butt naked. All I'll say is that I totally get why Betty wanted him back so bad. Simon is so damn funny in this episode. I love seeing him just act like a bratty kid. Him getting drunk as Prismo explains why Fiona and Cake exist is definitely the peak in terms of this episode's comedy. I also love that Simon and Prismo clearly have a bit of a grudge against each other. In the Come Along With Me montage, we saw Simon try and fail to wish for Betty back, so it's funny to imagine that this gave Simon a bit of a resentment towards Prismo. As Simon and Prismo are arguing, Kate grabs the remote, giving us yet another cameo. And, remember when I said that Prismo's new voice actor did an excellent job and wasn't very distracting to me? Well, unfortunately, I can't really say the same for Lemongrab. No offense to Jinx Monsoon, who also played one of the lemon carbs. They probably had to dub over Justin Roiland's lines last minute. Roiland is still a piece of shit, and I'd rather hear a terrible impression of one of his characters than to actually hear his voice again. That being said, it's still really awkward hearing this bad impression of him, and it usually takes me out of the episode a little bit. Fiona trying to beat up Prismo was definitely one of my favorite gags in the episode, so funny. Loved her yelling, "That tells me nothing!" Prismo flips through a few more universes, giving us a Farm World cameo, that universe that Finn and Jake end up in Beyond the Grotto, and some casual canonization of the marvelous misadventures of Flapjack. Fun fact, the Flapjack episode this shot is from was actually storyboarded by Pendleton Ward. We also get another Finn and Jake cameo. I loved Finn using the Night Sword, implying this takes place sometime during or shortly after Season 10. Soon after, we get possibly one of the craziest reveals in all of Adventure Time, that Prismo is the creator of Fiona and Cake. This is a reveal I've heard people express mixed thoughts on, but I've always really loved it. I've heard some people claim this is a continuity error, since Fiona and Cake were introduced in Season 3 and Prismo wasn't introduced until the start of Season 5. However, Prismo clearly experiences time differently from us, so it's entirely possible that he created Fiona and Cake after meeting Finn and Jake, but just beamed them into Ice King's head at a certain point before the first Fiona and Cake episode. I mean, we clearly see him manipulate time in crossovers, so that's totally not out of the realm of possibility. Hell, we even saw that a bit earlier in this episode with that Finn and Jake flashback. I like to think Prismo started beaming Fiona and Cake into Ice King's head sometime right before the episode still, since that explains why Ice King wanted to be Finn and Jake's friend so bad in that episode. Some people are also upset that this kinda takes away from the idea that Ice King was creating and sharing his own stories. Which is a sentiment I definitely understand, however, I don't think this was really taken away all that much. Sure, Prismo created Fiona and Cake, but Ice King still would have interpreted their stories in his own unique way. I mean, do y'all think Prismo wrote Fiona and Cake wanting to marry the Ice King? Or the entirety of Ice King's story in Bad Little Boy? If anything, this reveal just shows that multiple people can play a strong part in creating something. Sometimes art is collaborative. Ice King still had an extremely strong attachment to Fiona and Cake, and I don't think learning where they came from really takes anything away from that. I also think this reveal makes a lot of sense for Prismo. Prismo is such a sedentary character, always stuck in his time room granting wishes for other people. So it makes sense that Prismo would want to create something of his own, but have such little life experience that he basically ends up copying the universe he's most familiar with. And I like that the show never shames Prismo for creating Fiona and Cake. It's something he enjoyed doing and brought him comfort, which is why most people write fanfiction. Much like last episode, this one also has a deleted scene in which we see Prismo create Fiona and Cake. It's a fun sequence, I don't really have much to say about it, but I wish they kept it. We also get our first of 2 Ice King scenes in this series. I was hoping for a bit more classic Ice King in Fiona and Cake, but the little we do get is great. He feels very in character here. We also get the reveal that it was Prismo who was beaming Fiona and Cake into Ice King's mind. The mystery of where the beam from Fiona and Cake and Fiona came from was definitely one of the biggest loose threads the show had to address, and I'm glad they did. I don't really think this reveal makes Fiona and Cake and Fiona a better episode, seeing as this beam is only relevant to the last few seconds of the episode, but it at least makes the episode feel more necessary, I guess. One of my favorite scenes in the episode is Simon watching his last moment with Betty again. I absolutely love this shot, such a powerful moment. That look on Simon's face just gets me every time. It's at this point in the episode that Scarab re-enters. I bet you forgot about him. Prismo splits himself in two to distract Scarab while also protecting Fiona, Cake, and Simon, something that I don't think we've ever seen him do before. They have a lot of fun with this idea, going back and forth between the two Prismos. The Prismo and Scarab dynamic is pretty fun in this episode. I love the implication that they have some sort of history together. I choose to believe they're exes. I also loved getting to see more of the inside of the time room. Such a cool design, I wish we got to see it more. Fiona trips over her skirt, giving us another glorious shot of Simon's ass. Fiona complaining about her skirt is a great moment that helps separate her from Prismo/Ice King's fanfiction. She's her own person with her own wants and desires. I don't really have a strong opinion on the shorts compared to the skirt. I think they look fine on her, not really better or worse than the skirt. After that, we meet the Time Core. Love the visuals of this place. I'm kinda surprised these time guys never showed up again. It felt like they were being set up for something, but they at least make for a cool visual spectacle. In this same scene, Prismo introduces Fiona and Cake, as well as us the audience, to the multiverse. It's cool how they brought back the multiverse design we've seen in Crossover. We learned that because Fiona's world was created unauthorized, it is not part of the multiverse. After this, we learned that Prismo was planning on sending Fiona and Cake back into their world through Simon's head. It was cool getting to see the old man Prismo again. Fiona and Cake refuse to go through with it and storm off. I liked seeing Fiona and Cake grapple with the existential dread of knowing that they're technically not supposed to exist, though I do wish this moment was expanded upon a bit more. Meanwhile, Prismo accidentally lets it slip to Scarab that he created an unauthorized universe. I love the fact that Prismo has an entire room just for storing his pickles. I wonder if this is a room that Prismo's always had, or if he only created it after meeting Jake. Fiona and Cake end up back in the time room, in which they are caught by Scarab. I really like the scene where Prismo stands up to Scarab. It's a great moment for him. He gives Fiona his remote, and she, Cake, and Simon use it to teleport away just in time. The three of them end up in the farm world where the next episode will take place. They discuss what to do now, and the episode ends on the cliffhanger as Simon suggests he becomes Ice King again. Overall, Prismo the Wishmaster is definitely one of the craziest episodes of Fiona and Cake, as well as Adventure Time in general. The episode can definitely be described as one big exposition dump, but it's done in probably the best way possible, because you can see how much these lore reveals impact the characters, and the effect it has on their arcs in the following episodes. There's some really great character interactions in this one as well, and the amount of cameos we get is definitely the icing on the cake. And with that, we are finally done with the setup episodes and can now get into the multiverse hopping episodes. Please let me know your thoughts on Prismo the Wishmaster in the comments, and have a good one. Squill out.